I have someone here that I'm going to interview for you, and his name is Andrew. He'll be joining us just now, and he is my financial advisor. He's been mine for many years through working at BBDO. He works for Southern Charter, and along the way he has become Andy's as well, and he basically tells us everything we're supposed to do money-wise and everything for later on in life to make sure we're sorted for when we have to retire or when we're not actually earning money anymore. And he basically takes all our money and puts it in places to make it work best for us. I think it's quite an interesting topic, and I thought that you would all be interested in some of his pointers. So he's going to join us right now, and we're going to get A for a way. So we're back, and this is Andrew from Southern Charter, and as I told you, he does pretty much everything to do with my money to make sure that I have money when I'm old. Okay, so the first question that I had for Andrew was, I did an episode a while ago about insurance, and one part of insurance is life insurance, and it's always for that inevitable horrible thing that we don't like to talk about. But I thought he could tell us a little bit about do's and don'ts, because it is something you really should be prepared for, correct? Yep. And so what are the basic do's and don'ts, and what should we know about it?
Basically, like on life insurance, it's a bit of a tough one because it's not something that you want to think about, but it is really important. So specifically in different times of life insurance becomes a different animal, and the reason why you'd have it. So when you're younger and you've got a young family, it's important to have so that you're going to look after your loved ones, take care of debt and that kind of thing. But what happens over time is, as you get older, there's certain taxes that you're going to have to think about. So when you're younger, normally it's all to do with looking after your family and looking after cash flow and paying debt. And then when you get older and hopefully build up some wealth, then it becomes looking after taxes. So in the last budget, kicking in on the 1st of April, there's an additional tax that's going to come in if you really are very wealthy.
Which is not me.
Yeah, so that's a bit different, but that's why you should take these things into account, because one of the scariest things is when your estate's getting wrapped up and if there's not enough cash to be able to pay estate duties and things like that. So it's always good to sit once a year, do sort of a little calculation just to make sure that you are where you are.
Yeah.
But having said that it's nothing that you're going to be able to use in your lifetime, so you don't want to be paying a huge premium and it's not appropriate. So it's something that you should look at once a year.
Yeah.
And just make sure it's the right level.
And that's what we do. So Andrew comes and sees me at the beginning of every year, and he makes sure that whatever money I owe or whatever's happening in my life from a salary point of view, etc., he checks that all and makes sure that we're on track. And then he tells me if we need to put money in different places.
Put money away, yeah.
So we've moved some money this year, correct?
Yes,
based on what we know is happening. So that's the fabulousness of what Andrew does.
Look, the main thing about it all is just to make sure that you have a relationship and you touch base. So that's I mean, so that like nothing is ever a perfect plan, but make sure that you're working on something and you've got a goal. So once you've got a goal, it solves half the problem.
And then you just have to accept you're paying that money every month, and you're never going to actually benefit from it, but your loved ones will and they won't have to pay out all your bad mistakes.
Exactly. It's also
choices.
It's also a really cheap way of financing things. So if you think, all right, well, I'm going to pay my 20% estate duty, it's quite difficult to hand over your hard-earned cash, where you can pay a relatively small premium and be able to cover that debt. So it is one of the cheapest ways to pay for things after you're not here.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
Cool.
So just also to keep in mind when you have, I always call it Bri conversation. Somebody's like telling you that they're making this huge mint of money. Number one, around Bri conversation, in my experience, there's generally a couple of percentage extra that's been added on just to make it an exciting story, and which you must just take into consideration. But also really important is that there's never a situation where you're going to be able to outperform the cost of money. And what I mean by that is if you can go to the bank and they're going to say, round numbers, it's going to cost you 10% to borrow this money. And if somebody tells you, I can give you a guarantee of 15%, that makes no sense. Because if you think about it, then let's all club together, go and borrow R1 billion for a year, invest it, and we're going to get 5% free money. That will never happen. It can't. Economically, it doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
So when you get these sort of pyramid schemes and people talk about it, you've got to understand the risk. It's the same as Bitcoin, but like Bitcoin is a great investment. I think it's a great idea, but understand it's a really tricky thing.
Yeah.
And that you should only be putting money that you don't need into things like that. So last year was It was a phenomenal run. I think it blew everybody's socks off. And it's really difficult to understand.
Yeah.
So if I say to you, let's go and have a look at buying Sasol shares, there's a reason why you would do that. You can go and have a look at the company, and they're building refineries in the States that are coming online this year. So fundamentally, there's a reason why you would look at it. Bitcoin, it's an incredibly good platform, and it's a great way to move money around the world, which obviously is of interest to many people, including unsavory people, which makes it tricky. So it's very difficult to decide where. So just to watch for that. There's, like I keep saying, and I know it's boring, but there's no free lunches. You've got to just make sure that you know where you are and you know why things are happening.
And that's why people like you exist, right?
Yes.
To try and direct people logically and...
Yeah, but you see also there's always hype about things. And with social media now, it's so easy to get hyped about. And listen, we all get hyped about it. I mean, I bought Bitcoins last year. But you buy things like that with money that you don't need. And also have your other structures in place that you know that, like, if Bitcoin dips, you're not going to not be able to retire. You know, you've got all your different animals in place. Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay, then the next question is probably will require a little bit of a beep, but a friend of mine told me once when she was about to get married, her mom sat her down and said to her, right, getting married means you need a fuck you fund. And that was so that she put money away that nobody knew about, and she could use it for whenever she needed it. So I thought I'd ask Andrew, I mean, that's not relative to only girls getting married, but like, should we all have one of those little funds?
Yeah, I mean, the way we term it maybe is a little bit different, but financial independence is what you're talking about.
Yeah.
And I mean, that plays into all facets of life. But now there are things that, I mean, since 2009, there are products that you can buy that protect you against retrenchment.
Yes.
And traditionally, in the old days, what you would just do is have 3 months' salary saved away somewhere, so that if something disastrous happens, that you're not in the street. I mean, and that's the idea behind it. And financial independence, I think, has been with anything. If you're in a relationship and if you have some financial independence, it just gives you more ammunition when you're discussing things, I suppose. But so that's really important to have. I mean, look, different relationships work in different ways, and I don't have anything to say about that. But yeah, it's really, really good to have a situation where you've got your own cash in place, and you should have 3 months worth of salary saved up for whatever's going to happen, because there's always a rainy day. So what our parents used to tell us is, don't put all your eggs in one basket and save for a rainy day. And that rainy day will take different. You would have to do different things for different. So retirement, burst geyser, retrenchment. I mean, you know, you can't also save everything, but you should just have little pots of money that you in your own head know what they're for. Because understanding that retirement should never be something that you touch. So people go, okay, well, if I get retrenched, I'm going to use my pension fund money, I'm going to pay all my tax. That doesn't really make sense, because all the gains that you've made while you're working, you're now just giving back to the tax man. And that's the whole idea of, you get these catchphrases of pay yourself first, pay your future self first. So if you can put your money away and you're going to get a tax deduction, your future self's going to be really happy with you. If you put a little savings pocket away, so if something goes disastrously wrong and you don't have to raid everything else you have, or dip into your bond, which everybody goes, oh, it's I can take 100,000 right out and it only cost me 1,000 rand. But obviously understand you're paying that off over 20 years. It's an incredibly expensive way to go. So fuck you fund is really important, but it's I mean, it's just a way of financial liberation. So. 100%. You know, if you're not financially dependent on somebody, you obviously have got more choices.
Okay, then there were 2 questions that Andrew added to my list of things that people keep asking him about. The first one was around rating agencies and what they are, how do they control us, what are they, what's the effect of them?
Yeah, I mean, rating agencies have obviously been in the spotlight for the last 9 years. And many people feel very aggrieved by it, because why are we getting controlled by these people? The other side of things is also that they protect us. So it's the same way as when we go to the bank and we ask for a bond and we've got to fill out the questions. The reason why we fill that out is because a bank's looking after many people, and if the bank is giving out loans where people can't repay them, then we end up with what's happening with the housing crisis in the States. And the reason in 2008, 2007 where we were less impacted is that we had a really good financial system and we didn't have these crazy loans that were getting paid out and whatever. So what happens is, when the rating agencies have a look at it, basically it's stating how the government's going to be able to pay back the loans that they take. So when we do things in their eyes that are a little bit silly, they make it more expensive for us to pay back those loans. And that's essentially what is happening. And there's a lot to that in terms of investment grade and junk status and all that. But very simply is that they're watching us, and that does put pressure on governments to do economically the right thing.
Yeah.
Whether it's always the right thing, then that's a different discussion. But it's not a bad thing to have, because you aren't allowed to just go off on your own sort of direction and not take other people into account. And that's what's happening at the moment, and that's why I think it's going to be so important, and it is so important for our president now to sort of join all the dots, which he seems to be doing really well at the moment. So it's an exciting time.
Holding thumbs, yeah.
Yes.
Okay, and then the last question was around how do interest rates change, so the repo rate, and how does that affect the man on the ground?
Yes, so I mean, interest rates are basically the first point where you start looking at investments and how they affect us, because it's the main tool that the Reserve Bank and monetary policy has to try and control things. So what they look at is that we try and target inflation to make sure that inflation is under control. So simply, inflation is when people compete for products, they get more expensive. And you don't want that to be out of control, because obviously if things get more and more expensive, it just becomes difficult. So when inflation goes up, or the competition, there's a lot of money, the government pushes the cost of borrowing up.
Yes.
So it slows everything down, and that obviously has a huge impact in investing, where you can put money, what you should be doing, and how you should be, because there's always a balancing act between debt and investing. So as the interest rates are going up, it's an opportunity that you should be looking at paying off your debt, versus if the interest rates are really low, you could borrow and then invest and get a differential there. So that's what essentially is happening, and that's what controls our rand too, because at the moment, obviously, rates in the States and in Europe and most of the world are so cheap that pension funds can bring their cash from there, invest it in South Africa, and get free money as long as our currency is fairly stable. So yes, that's a very big part of what is happening at the moment, and that's why there's so much work being done on a stable currency. Work on, obviously, they watch what the states do on their rate, because if they push their rate up, we have to do the same, so that it can control what the amount of growth that you're going to get in a money market here. Okay. So it's a very interesting part of the whole investment cycle.
And one last question that we didn't prepare for.
Yes.
While I'm thinking about it, VAT going up?
VAT. Yeah, I mean, look, unfortunately, it was a very, very difficult decision to make, because it does seem like VAT encompasses everybody from the poor to the super rich, and everybody essentially gets tarred with the same brush. The problem that we've had is, over the last 3 cycles, that income tax has been pushed up to a point, and with anything there's a tipping point. So I think if they had to push the income tax up again, number one, I think they would know that avoidance would become a really big thing. So eventually people's threshold to pay tax just comes to an end, and also then the really wealthy start moving offshore. And also, if you start trying to tax companies more, they're going to stop doing business here. So it's a balancing act. Whereas VAT is and it's the most efficient tax, because you push it up and it comes in.
You can't avoid it, right?
Yeah, and you can't avoid it. But having said that, it's obviously it's a huge burden on the most vulnerable. So it's a really difficult thing. But what the government's trying to do now is they're more zero items. But yeah, it's a difficult thing. But I think that was the only move that they could have done. I mean, there's a big hole in the fiscus.
It's a pain. You keep getting all these SMSs and emails to say your payments are going up on the 1st of April because of VAT. But I suppose once we're into April and it's happening, we'll actually just accept it and get on with it. Well, thanks, Andrew. I really appreciate it. We're going to link below Andrew's details, so anybody who needs to talk to him about this kind of stuff, or Southern Charter, he'll direct you within there, I'm sure, if it's not for him. But I'm sure it is for him. We'll link all his details below for you, so that you can get a hold of him. And I hope that's helped some of you with some questions that you have. And have a good day. Bye.